Well, speaking of pretty wacky, the first time you came onto my radar was through the Roddy Piper podcast with the legendary, well, Roddy Piper. Uh, it's such a shame that it ended when it did. Well, obviously because Roddy died, nobody wanted him to die. Oh, nice.
It's autographed, my autographed bubblegum soda.
But it was it because I remember when I first heard the podcast, it kind of shit, frankly. And then as you joined, it started getting really good. It became like funnier, wittier, and then tragically, the worst outcome came from Roddy passing away. But I gotta ask you, during your time, I remember there being just from reading the dirt sheets, there was some kind of fallout between Roddy Piper and Steve Austin because of something that happened on the podcast. And that's all we ever heard. We never heard what it was. So, is there any form of insight that you could give into the Roddy Piper Steve Austin feud?
Oh yeah, I mean that was right before I joined the podcast. When I think maybe about 2 3 weeks before I came on the podcast as originally it was just supposed to be one episode, and then I think Roddy's both his manager and the producer of the podcast were like, "Hey, you and Roddy have good chemistry. Do you want to be the sidekick?" So I stepped into that, not knowing really what was going on. And the great comic Will Sasso, who was on Mad TV, and I think he played Curly on the Three Stooges, the movie, and like tons of other things. Um, he, I guess, was on the podcast a few weeks before I got there, and he did an impression of Stone Cold that if you listen to it, and I'm sure you could find it on YouTube uh, or old. I don't know what they did with the old episodes, podcast one, which was the network, but I'm sure it could be found. If you closed your eyes and didn't know it was Will Sasso, you would have thought it was Stone Cold. And it was really funny, and it was totally harmless. He didn't reference any of like Stone Cold's personal problems. I think there was something about Deborah, his ex-wife, and him were going at it in terms of allegations about stuff. He didn't say anything about that. And then right when I came on, I think we did, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 episodes. And then we got kicked off podcast one. And I was like, what? The ratings are huge. Like, not because of me, but, he got, I think it was something like between 50,000 and 100,000 listens or downloads, which is a lot. Like my podcast gets, I don't know, maybe 5,000, and that's on a good day. So to get 10 times that, it's a fair amount of money with ads and sponsors. So it made no sense that we got kicked off, and then we went to the Earwolf Network, which is I guess a competing podcast network. And then we got kicked off of that. And I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense. And Roddy's management team were like, oh, yeah, Stone Cold's. Now, I don't know if he said this or not. This is just what they told me. He's like, yeah, he wasn't too happy with the impression. So he gave podcast one an ultimatum. It's either Roddy or me. And then, Airwolf, I'm sure, was like, well, we've seen your numbers. You can come do it at our network. And so it didn't make sense. We got kicked off of there too. And then like Stone Cold, who I never really had a problem with. I don't know the guy. He blocked me on Twitter. So it was like some weird beef him and Piper had. And I think that really helped hasten Roddy's life because, these guys, when you get to Piper's age, I think he was 61 when he died. He had been wrestling literally since the age of 15. That's a lot of punishment, a lot of chair shots, a lot of concussions, a lot. Broken bones. So he was tired, man. I mean, he was 61, but his body was literally probably over 100. So a successful podcast was a great way to not have to travel as much and do the autograph signings, which he loved doing, but you still have to go to New York, travel across the country and all that stuff. It's taxing on you at 61, at any age, but especially at 61. So the working plan was for Roddy to just keep doing my podcast, and then he was going to figure it out. And the day he was supposed to come over to start the I guess the new era of Piper's Pit meets Inappropriate Earl. I'm not sure what we were going to call it. Probably just Inappropriate Earl at the moment. He passed away. So I'm not saying Stone Cold killed him, but he didn't help the process, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've always thought that it was strange because like with the way cancel culture is, and like Hulk Hogan get in trouble for the tape of the N word being said, and we all know what that word means, right?
But yeah, unfortunately, we do. It's an awful word, but
yeah, unless you're stuck in traffic.
Well, or you're on an all-black cartoon, you get a free pass. But I mean, it's just sad. But he was awesome to work with. So I know he really doing the podcast with me just because I could be the bad guy. He was he's 61. His family's got kids. He's grown man now. They're grown. Colt is a grown man, and his daughters. I think he wanted to just be a dad, interact with his fans when he could, and then I could be the Rick Rude type bad guy, and because I didn't care about working with the WWE or TNA or WCW. WCW wasn't around anymore, but so I would speak my mind. I would be very, very honest. Whereas if you look at most wrestlers, because I've reached out to a few who are in WWE, AEW now, and I'm like, hey, will you come on my podcast? And they all say yeah, because they're fans of my comedy or whatever. But they're like, you can't ask us any wacky questions. We gotta stay employed. So that's what happens when WWE and AEW, they're really and I guess you could say Ring of Honor. When you only have 3 places that can hire you can't burn a bridge with them, so you got to kind of kiss their ass.
The accusations against Steve Austin from Deborah McMichael, do you believe them?
I mean, I don't know. That's it's a from what I recall, because I didn't really follow the story too much. It was abuse allegations, and I think it's with those type of things, whether it be a wrestler, actors, and their exes, it's a he said she said type situation. It's often in divorces it gets pretty nasty, and a lot of those things that are said are untrue, and a lot of times they are true. So it's I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, because we don't really know Stone Cold the person or Deborah the person. We know their characters. So it's like Roddy. I think most people would think he was an asshole based on his character, but in reality, he was like the nicest guy on earth. I remember when I started working with him, I was like, I used to hate you. And he got sad. He's like, why did you hate me? I'm like, well, I thought you were really a bad guy. It's like when you see Kamala, rest in peace. Let me throw this out at you. So I always do this in any wrestling. But when you see Kamala walk into the ring, especially in his early years, they would show kids crying because they thought he was literally a cannibal. And by all accounts, he was like the nicest guy on earth. I always, and when it comes to allegations, and I always think both sides should be heard. She, I mean, obviously she never hit a woman, but she might have made it up, or maybe he hit her. I don't know.
Yeah, but the thing about Roddy Piper is like it's well known that Brock Lesnar, he hates wrestling. He just loves the money, and he doesn't give a flying fuck about it. But he was willing to interact with Roddy on TV during one of Roddy's last appearances, and just the fact that Lesnar would give him the time of day is a sign that he's like saying, "No, I fucking love him."
Oh yeah, I mean Lesnar doesn't really, seems like he enjoys working with a lot of people. So I think that speaks to how nice Roddy was. Um, and I don't blame him for not liking the business. I mean, who would like that business? It's like being the person who issues parking tickets. I don't know if they have they call them meter maids in Los Angeles, where if you don't put enough money in your parking meter, you get a ticket. Like, who would like that job? But people do it. And I'm sure it's not for the money, but in pro wrestling, the lifestyle, you're constantly under pressure to look a certain way, unless you're like your character is the fat guy. So I don't blame Lesnar. They often said that about the Ultimate Warrior, that he didn't like the business. He just wanted the money. It was like, yeah, I mean, the guy looked great. And in that era that he wrestled in, that was what made the most money. So he decided to look like he did, no matter how he got to get that body, whether it be steroids or not. And he didn't put a lot of time into being a great wrestler, but he didn't have to. So I find very few people outside of maybe Stu Hart actually liked the business.
Can I pitch you my idea for a modern 2021 version of Steve Austin?
Sure.
And instead of Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's called Secretly Gay Steve Austin. And
Well, yeah.
he skips to the ring with swinging his waistcoat over his head, but he still got his hot denim pants on, the wee short shorts. He climbs up on the ropes backwards. He instead of crashing two beer cans, he has two dicks, and he smashes them like this, and he shakes it all over his face. And his finishing move is he picks the opponent up for the tombstone, but he falls backwards and gets pinned every time.
I mean, there's worse ideas that have made it. When I watched, I used to go to this organization called XPW, which was like a very low budget, much more violent version of ECW. So it was a lower budget ECW. Think about that, because ECW had no budget, and they had a gay wrestler named Angel, and his finishing move was he'd somehow overpower you, and instead of going on your back for the pen count, you'd end up on all fours, and he would get behind you and pump you 3 times for the pin. So it was pretty funny, but they really went for it in XPW. Like, they had a team called the West Side N-word, but they spelled it out they had merchandise. Like,
nerds.
Not really. It's a word that rhymes with oil rigger. But there was kids at these shows, so they had like printed merchandise. So
hang on.
I never say any idea can't be done in the world of wrestling.
So it began with N and ended in R.
ER.
Oh, so it was the West Side Neighbors.
Yes, that's it. That's exactly right. They, but so when you throw me an idea like that, I'm like, I mean, if XPW was around, they'd still do it.
Sold. But
I mean, their ring announcer dressed in a Hitler outfit and would goose step to the ring, doing the Nazi salute, and like the crowd went nuts. These shows were completely sold out, usually held at a high school gym, which they probably seat, I don't know, maybe 1,000, and there was probably 1,200 packed in these gyms. And it was just so funny to watch. And the only reason I was going was my hairdresser at the time. Her husband was Sabu's best friend, and Sabu was in XPW, so we'd go watch him. And like, it was kind of sad to see some of these guys who had big names wrestling in a high school gym. But XPW was most famous for the one match New Jack had where he tased Vic Grimes on the top of a very shaky scaffold. Like how Vic Grimes didn't die and it's a very famous clip. You can just YouTube Vic Grimes New Jack and you'll see the clip. It was unbelievable. I still to this day don't know how Vic Grimes didn't die, or at least break his neck.